Yo, what's going on, guys? Hope you all are having a fantastic day. So I got some Christmas money and bought some fly tying stuff. I also bought this book, Modern Streamers for Trophy Trout by Kelly Galloup. It's actually super ironic because I was looking to get his original book, which actually came out in, I think, 1998, 1999, something like that. It came out in the 90s. And I was looking to get his old book, mainly because I didn't know this new book came out. But I ordered my materials from the Slide In, which is Kelly's store, and I happened to see that this book was there. So I bought it up. It was like 40 bucks. And I started reading it. And I've only read the introduction and chapter one. And I have to say that the book so far has absolutely blown my mind. It's kind of taken everything that I've kind of come to know about streamer fishing and where big fish live and kind of thrown it out the window in a sort of way. Maybe not quite thrown out the window, but made me realize some trends that I have seen but never really put together. And so it was kind of funny, I had a super jaw-dropping moment when he talks about, 21, 22, 23-inch fish and he calls them cute. And I don't know about you, but I got a little insecure about that. I caught my biggest brown ever last year, a 23-inch brown. I caught another stud that was about 22, 23 inches, a couple 20s, a couple 21s, and I was just so pumped about those fish. And I'm still pumped about those fish, and Kelly is pumped about those fish too. He doesn't hate on fish that small. He doesn't think they're less of fish. Um, but this book is solely about targeting trophy fish. And in his mind, that's about 24 inches to 30 inches plus. And he talks about where these fish live. That's essentially what the first chapter is where these fish live, which is super important because there's not an incredible amount of fish out there that size, and it's important that you're looking in the right spots. And so one of the common misconceptions, well, here I'll first break down where those fish are. So Kelly did a lot of snorkeling in some of his rivers, his local rivers. He had some stories from his childhood, and he basically formulated that these big fish tend to live in somewhat shallow areas, about 18 inches to 36 inches, which that means your peak depth is pretty much 3 feet, which is not super deep. That's a lot of what most of us wade in, especially 18 inches. That probably only comes up to my knee, maybe a little less. That's mid shin height, something like that. I'm 6'4", so that's a little lower on me than most people, but 18 to 36 inches, usually on the inside of a bend, which for me is something that kind of blew my mind a little bit because I typically look at the outside of a bend and think that the water is a little deeper. It's usually faster. You fish that inside seam of that outside bend and you have like a bug factory. Like you have this conveyor belt of food and you have the security of the deeper water. Plus, during washout events, log jams usually come and they get stuck in the bends. So you have like a log jam, some structure, something so those fish feel secure. And that's great. Um, and the food's great, the security's great. The thing is, those fish don't need it. When he talks about how these big fish, they feed at night. They're typically looking for smaller fish, bait fish, trout, whatever it be. They're not really eating bugs all that often. So they're not feeding during the day. They don't need that conveyor belt of small nymphs, of small dries, or whatever it is. He even has a story in there about fishing the hexagona hatch, which is a massive mayfly, and he would hear these loud splashes. And when I first thought about that, I'm like, okay, this big fish is just hammering one of these big mayflies. It's not the case at all. That big fish is hammering the small fish that are feasting on these flies. As he talks about like a bowling ball like being thrown in there, that's what it sounded like in the dead of night. Um, but in reality, those fish, they don't need to sit there and they don't need to be feed because during the day they're not feeding. He also talks about how when you're 24 to 30 plus inches, wherever you top out at, you don't need security. You are top dog. That's like it's kind of like Shaq. Shaq's not super aggressive, but some big boxer guy. He really doesn't need to have security because he's going to mess your day up if you mess with him. And so these big fish will sit in this somewhat shallow water. Frankly, like, dude, what are you going to do? You can't mess with me. Like, I'm bigger than you. And the funny thing is that they're not even really scared of humans. In some of the stories Kelly talks about, he talks about some of his snorkeling encounters, even some of his encounters while he was fishing. And he encountered these massive fish, and he never once saw one spook. They just kind of swim away slowly, like, hey, F you, like, this is my spot, but hey, I guess I'm going to relocate, slowly swim away. Rather, when you see these little fish, like, poof, they dart, they're gone. Same with muskie, same with other predators. These fish just don't care. They know they're top dog, they'll sit where they want to, and whatnot. The big if and the big kind of against the inside of the bend is, or that they'll sit in heavy water, is boulders or some other debris that'll block it, kind of create a seam in the current where these big fish can rest. They're lazy, especially during the day. They're just kind of chilling. They're just hanging out, doing their thing, and like they go on the prowl at night. So they're spending a lot of energy at night, and they're resting all day. So it kind of makes you think, you think they're in shallow water, they're feeding at night, they're just resting all day. How do you catch them during the day? And for the most part, you probably don't. I mean, not that you probably don't, you will catch them during the day, and that's kind of what the next chapter goes into. I haven't read it yet. I'm looking forward to indulging in it. But to come full circle back to the beginning where he calls those small fish cute, there's kind of a reason why it didn't kind of make me feel any less or devalue any of the fish that I caught. Something he talks about, I don't know if it's in the introduction or in that first chapter, some streams just flat out don't have monster sized fish, these 26, 28, 24 inch fish. And he even talks about when you're searching for these fish, when you are truly trophy hunting, when that's your only goal, you're not trying to catch any other fish, you are trophy hunting. That if you don't see a big fish eventually, see one move, see one just hole in there, it's probably not there. Which is kind of, I don't know, kind of liberating in a way, because, you no longer fish that stretch of water and you move on, find the spot they are. But I look back at some of the big fish I caught last year. I caught a stud of a 23-inch brown. I almost said 30. Absolute stud of a 23-inch brown trout. And another stud that was probably like 22, maybe 23. I didn't actually tape that one. I taped the other one. And just slobs. And regardless of whether he says they're cute or not, to me, they will always be slobs. And even on some smaller streams, dude, I get pumped. I mean, absolutely pumped about like some 18-inch fish. And on some really small streams, a 13-inch fish will blow my mind, especially brook trout, a 12-inch brook trout, 13-inch brook trout. If I get a 15-inch brook trout, I will absolutely go freaking nuts. And that has to do with size being relative in my mind. Like he says, some of these streams don't have big fish, like trophy-sized fish. And so that makes the term monster relative. So that 23-inch fish, that 22-inch fish, that 18, that 13-inch size, that 13-inch fish is monstrous. Monstrous. So don't ever be discouraged about the size of fish you're catching. Even if you're hunting for trophies, 15-inch fish on a small brook trout stream is a trophy. I don't care what anyone else says. I don't know if Kelly would agree with me on that. Don't know him personally. I think he would. And by no means do I think that he's hating on these smaller fish. But those fish are definitely monsters relative to the water you're catching them on. So just my food for thought today. I'm super excited to learn more from this book. It has 100%, just the first chapter, been worth the money you paid for it. I might skip forward. I want to learn a little bit more about the tactics, the presentations, just because I want to be fishing throughout this whole process. I am going to read this book cover to cover. That's something I don't always do, and it's something I've actually talked about against in the past when it comes to how-to books for fly fishing. I think doing is always better. I think that's true for a lot of different things, but I do plan on reading this book cover to cover. However, I do think I'm going to skip forward, read some of the presentations because I want to be fishing through this whole process. You know, when I have days off, I want to be on the water. I caught a beautiful brown yesterday, which you'll probably see. And I am now starting my quest for the trophy trout. This book has gotten me pumped. I don't think it's going to be a short journey. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm kind of going to be talking through some of my thought processes when fishing the water, kind of comparing notes with Kelly. He fishes a lot of big waters. I fish a lot of small waters right now. Hopefully, if I do move out west, I'll get to fish some of those bigger waters and apply some of these better. Um, but I really am excited to dive further into the book. Um, I'm just excited. It's exciting. Streamer fishing to me is exciting. I got 2 sink tips sitting on the desk. I got flies, tying material on the floor. I'm tying some new flies. I'm just excited. So I hope you all have enjoyed. I hope you all have gained something from this. I'd be interested to know your thoughts on it, your comments, your biggest fish, whatever. Drop in the comments, send me a message wherever, and enjoy. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Catch some big fish for me, catch some small fish for me, and we'll see you next time.